Tonight on Nation to Nation, is a bill ending the second generation cutoff heading for a showdown?
But trying to predetermine a solution for somebody, for a group, if you do not live with the reality of that issue, is racism itself.
Government may raise, as a point of order, potentially scope on stating reasons why maybe this bill shouldn't stand as it is.
Welcome to Nation. I'm Karen Pugliese. Tonight, we're taking another look at Bill S-2. S-2 was originally meant to deal with a lawsuit and restore status to a small group of First Nations people. But since we last spoke with Senator Paul Prosper, things have changed dramatically. A Senate committee heard from 57 witnesses, and that sent Bill S-2 way off its original path. The committee passed amendments to end the second generation cutoff. What does that mean? Well, we'll find out. And Indigenous Services Minister Mandy Golmasti asked the Senate not to make those changes. We'll get into why they went ahead and did it anyway. Senator Paul Prosper, the man who proposed the amendments, is back with us tonight. Welcome.
Hi, Karen.
Now, there are a number of amendments, and this can get very technical. But just for people who are sitting at home saying, would I get status back under this bill? What is the simplest way that you can explain whether they would qualify or not?
Sure. If that person, listening in or thinking about this, if they have one parent who is a status person, then they would qualify as being a status person. I guess that's the easiest way I can put it. If you have one parent.
Right. Now, how far back would that go? Because let's say you had a grandparent who had status, then would that person, make your mother or father status, and then you would have, could it affect grandchildren that way?
Well, it does address the second generation cutoff, which was introduced in 1985. What I want to sort of draw attention to is to those children who have a status parent, let's say they're 6'2" status, and their other parent is a non-status person. So you essentially have a 6'2" status person and a non-status person. The children of that sort of union, they will not have status under the second generation cutoff.
Right.
The nature of these amendments is to restore status to those individuals. And just as long as one of their parents is a status person, they would have status.
Okay. And so we're talking about people who were essentially born after 1985. You're not opening the whole floodgates.
That's correct.
So no, just to be clear also, status is the legal recognition from the federal government. Some bands who make up their band membership list under the Indian Act, that would qualify people to perhaps be band members, but those under custom code have their own process for band members. So they're two separate things. Do I have that right?
Yes, under the Indian Act, there are basically two mechanisms. There is the mechanism for First Nation bands to develop their own membership code under Section 10 of the Indian Act. If they don't have their own code, then the default is that it is managed by Indigenous Services Canada.
Okay, great. I think that's really helpful for people to understand how this is working. Now, Indigenous Services Minister Mandy Golmasti made a rare second appearance, I would say, before a committee. It's not very often that a minister goes back. I do have to say, this is a minister's bill. It was introduced to the Senate, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a bit. But she made an initial appearance to explain the bill and then came back because she got wind that the Senate was considering amendments. And I just want to take a listen to what she said.
I have had leadership call me from the very list that we submitted who informed me that they would engage in litigation if the duty to consult was not respected. So I know that there is a strong desire to have a solution, but I will first and foremost uphold my responsibility as a minister and address duty to consult. because unfortunately, I may not be kind in my remark, but trying to predetermine a solution for somebody, for a group, if you do not live with the reality of that issue, is racism itself. And I will not uphold that as a minister.
So there's some pretty strong words there. I mean, the first question I've got to ask you, she's saying that there needs to be a consultation process. We know that First Nations have really fought for consultation processes. Should not there be one?
I guess when you would have to situate this matter within its full context and what has taken place since 1985. And the reality is there has been significant consultations that have taken place even prior to the introduction of this bill as it relates to second generation cutoff. There's been a number of reports. There has been an actual study that the Senate has undertaken, all pointing to the need to remove the second generation cutoff. You know, I think that's an important component to take into consideration, is that history and that movement. So it's something that I think warrants consideration, especially given the evidence we heard.
Okay, and I know you heard from a number of witnesses. Almost all of them did ask for the Senate to amend it and do the second generation cutoff. Why is there such pressure to amend this bill and to do it now and not wait?
Well, the second generation cutoff, as I mentioned, has existed for some time. And the approach that has been taken recently with government in terms of dealing with the discriminatory provisions within the Indian Act is to wait until there's an actual court case being brought forward, and you have situations where a case, deems certain provisions unconstitutional as discriminatory provisions within the Indian Act, and government sort of defines a very narrow approach to deal with that. So in essence, they don't deal with all the discriminatory provisions within the Indian Act. And certainly you have judges like Justice Mass in the Deschanel case that is providing firm direction to government that this piecemeal approach of dealing with discriminatory provisions within the Indian Act on a piecemeal basis is not the appropriate way to deal with it. The appropriate way to deal with it is to deal with all those provisions that are discriminatory once and for all. And so these amendments intend to do essentially that, is to address all the discriminatory provisions within the Indian Act.
Okay, so I just want to ask you a couple of things quickly. One of the things the minister brought up is that these amendments might open the government to lawsuits. It sounds like the government's open to lawsuits anyway.
Well, exactly. I mean, there's a number of outstanding lawsuits.
Is the fact that these amendments, if they pass, does it take away the minister's ability to consult, or can't she just go ahead and consult anyway on the how?
I think that's a fair point you make, because part of these amendments does provide a certain period for this act with these amendments to come into effect. It's a year, it's 12 months. And so there are ongoing discussions, quote, consultations being currently undertaken by the minister. And it provides a mechanism for those discussions, those consultations, to be incorporated within the overall government approach to this.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Senator. We're going to have you back in a little bit.
Okay.
But first, when we come back, we're going to talk to a First Nation that says they're a little hesitant to support these amendments, and we'll ask them why. Welcome back to Nation. Today we're looking at Bill S-2. legislation that could finally address one of the most damaging chapters in the Indian Act. One of the groups most impacted by S-2 are members of what was once the Michelle Band. The Michelle Band was a First Nation in Alberta, formed by Haudenosaunee, Cree, and Métis families under Treaty 6. The majority of them lost legal status in 1958 when Canada used a provision of the Indian Act to fully dissolve the band. Today, Bill S-2 could restore status to many former band members, and that opens the door to formally recognizing a new Michelle First Nation. I'm joined now by Beverly Asman, who is a director of the Michelle Kalahu Nation Society, and their lawyer, Troy Chaloufou. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having us on your show. We really appreciate this. Well, the history that we have is a sad history. Group of hardworking people through a series of government issues, they sadly destroyed our band. And we were completely enfranchised in 1958. We lost all we had, culture, language, home, family. We lost everything due to the government and their ideas. But we were a hardworking group of people, resilient, but we just couldn't keep up with the government, and we lost everything.
So it was really lost. How, Troy, was that First Nation dissolved?
The Michelle Band and the descendants of the band, they're signatories to Treaty 6, Michelle Kalahu. And they had reserve lands just west of Edmonton in and around Morinville area, south of what is currently the Alexander Reserve. And those were among the most valuable agricultural lands in the West at the time. And so they had considerable holdings, as Bev said. They were a hardworking group of people. But Canada never provided the necessities under their obligations under treaty. So they were forced to purchase a lot of those things and were induced to surrender their lands to acquire the resources to purchase the very things that the treaty was to provide. And Canada did not provide it. And couple that with enfranchisements that occurred where there were dubious votes taken to secure the enfranchisements, and people were looking for a way to get out of the Indian Act because they were starving. They were being forced into residential schools, so they needed out. They needed an alternative. And the lands, in our view, were illegally surrendered. So they were literally stripped of their well-being, their existence, and their culture. They were a diverse but cohesive community back then, but they've been spread out all over the place now. And slowly the nation has been bringing them home, so to speak, finding out who they are, collecting the names, and building a base to pursue band creation.
So Troy, I understand that this movement to recreate the Michelle Band has been going on for some time. Can you tell me a little bit about what's been happening and how close you are to actually getting the band legally and like back together again?
Well, the under the Indian Act, there's provision pursuant to Section 17 that will allow the minister to recreate the band or create a band through an order in council. And there's a process attached to that pursuant to a policy that has been under review for decades. And so the rules in which we proceed to this band creation are a bit ambiguous. And we proceed slowly and doggedly with Canada to advance this to a situation where the government will make a request to the minister. We believe that we're close to that. And but we are frustrated because the rules are still ambiguous. Bill S-2 certainly will have an impact in terms of the magnitude and size of the band when it is created. Right now, we have identified approximately 1,000 descendants that are part of the movement, and there are, and give or take, and there are going to be approximately 3,000 more added to that list. And so knowing definitively who the descendants are is a process, and that is something that Canada will want to know. So that's been ongoing for years, but we've been doing this process. The formal request was made a couple of years ago, but people like Bev and others within the board have been requesting band creation for decades. And so it's a bit of fiction that Canada will say, well, it's only been a couple of years. Well, it's been decades.
So what would it mean to you to have a band again? What would it mean?
Oh my. Well, I started this when I was 15, trying to figure out who I was, where I came from. And all I've ever wanted was to belong. I've never belonged anywhere. I've been out on different reserves, I've worked for different bands, but I never belong anywhere. And I guess it's just trying to find a home and to gain some culture and to find some family that that we deserve to have.
And Troy, you talked a little bit about how S-2 is going to impact the Michelle Band. The Michelle Band did express some concerns about the Senate making amendments to this bill, and how that could delay the bill. Can you express to me why there's concerns about the Senate opening this up and getting rid of the second generation cutoff?
Well, in a nutshell, because it's massive. And the way that it's put to the Michelle Nation is almost as though it's an either or proposition, whether we support those amendments, additional amendments or not. We absolutely support them. The problem is those amendments will impact potentially tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people. So Canada needs to understand that. And let's not kid ourselves. Even if if Canada moved forward with those amendments, there's a litany of other discriminatory provisions of the Indian Act that need to be addressed. Canada is not, nor has it ever been, in a position to enact omnibus legislation to fix all that is wrong with the Indian Act. They tried doing that in 1985, and this is the legacy. So we're not against the amendments. The amendments will support many of the descendants of Michelle. The problem is right now, this bill was created to address two things. One is the Nicholas decision and the enfranchisement. And if those hit pause in order to address the rest of it, well, then you're pursuing perfection at the expense of the good. And I don't think that that's what Parliament intended.
Thank you. I want to thank you both for joining me today, and I wish you luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So is this bill going to be delayed because of these amendments? And will the amendments be undone as the bill moves along? Senator Paul Prosper is back after the break to tell us what he thinks.
I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee. But I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
Gee, Bill, you certainly have a lot of patience.
All right, well, we're back with Senator Paul Prosper. He's back with us tonight. And what you just saw was from Schoolhouse Rock, a classic American explainer of how a bill becomes a law in the US. Now, I didn't have a Canadian version to play for you, but honestly, it's not that far off. Now, in our version, the question is, are the amendments the standing committee made going to stick? What happens to Bill S-2 from here? Senator, if we could walk through it. First, we've just heard that the amendments that you made could delay the bill. Could it be delayed?
I think that's largely depending upon how government is going to approach this amended bill. So a lot of it sort of rests within their discretion on how they want to deal with it.
Okay, so let's just kind of walk it in. Right now, it's in the amendments were made in the Senate Standing Committee on Indigenous Issues, and Where does it go from there? And maybe you could tell me what the tripping points are where the amendments might be killed or changed back, or what could happen.
Certain procedural or technical issues that government might want to raise regarding the scope of the bill.
Right, because it goes to the Senate.
Yeah.
And then it has to go to the House of Commons afterwards, which I think I'll just ask you about that before I ask you what happens if it makes it to the House of Commons. But usually a bill is passed in the House of Commons and then goes to the Senate. This one was introduced into the Senate first. Do you know why that was?
I don't have a direct knowledge of that. It's within their discretion to do that.
Sometimes they do, yeah.
And obviously they saw fit to bring it first in the Senate. So since it's with us, it has to clear the Senate process. Maybe technical issues that government may raise as a point of order, potentially scope on, so stating reasons why maybe this bill shouldn't stand as it is, that it's beyond, it goes in a different direction than the true intention of the bill, potentially. So those are some of the technicalities that could be raised. But all in all, that report has to be voted on and approved by the Senate. And so if we're successful in addressing those technicalities that could potentially arise, then it would go to third reading the following week. And that therein lies another potential opportunity for government to raise technical issues or provide reasons why the bill, the amended bill, should not, be approved and passed at third reading. I think there's good indications that it will pass third reading, but you always need to take into account certain possibilities. And if it's a case that it passes at third reading, then it would go over to the other place, to the House of Commons, and they would undertake their process, which is quite similar to ours.
So it does sound like it's got a long way to go yet. But thank you for being with us and explaining all that to us.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I need to tell you this. Through little television magic, that interview with Senator Prosper was pre-recorded. And as you're watching this, Senator Prosper is in Senate, where amendments to Bill S-2 are facing the first in that series of challenges he told us about. We'll keep you posted on what happens. And next week, we're going to be at the AFN Special Assembly in Ottawa. S-2 is on the agenda, and so is the One Canadian Economy Law. The Prime Minister's been invited, and we'll see if he accepts. It is going to be a busy week, and we'll come at you from on location. If you missed any part of tonight's show, you can always catch our podcast at aptnnews.ca/podcasts. Good night.